Hello and welcome to this episode of Selling Education. Today I'm delighted to welcome Umang Gandecha, Executive Director of Londonist Global, and he leads the strategy and operations at Londonist DMC, one of the UK's top student accommodation agencies, which spans London, Istanbul and Shanghai offices. He is fluent in Mandarin and he's expanded those global partnerships, especially across Asia, elevating the business and earning himself a spot on the Hurun UK Under-35s list in 2023, which is impressive. Under his guidance and Asim Ertuk's leadership, Londonist has claimed the Study Travel Star Service Provider Award for 5 years running, making them a superstar. But if you know him at all, he's not just award-winning. Umang is a style icon, always sharply dressed, impeccably put together, as you are today, reflecting his attention to detail and command of first impressions. And since our pre-COVID sales coaching days, we've continued collaborating, and it's been an absolute thrill and an honour to see his rise in the company and in the industry, and I'm really proud to know him. Hi, Umang, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Nicola. Thank you for the amazing introduction. I can say no, it's been a pleasure knowing you as well for many years, Nicola. It feels like more than just business, as you know. Friendship has gone many years.
Lovely, yeah, it's so lovely when you can work with people that you just like. It just makes life
Yeah,
easier.
definitely makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It does. So you've always been the best dressed person in the room, and you've got some competition, but you really are. Do you think that your appearance plays a role in your success and maybe in sales?
I never see myself as the best dressed. I do get obviously a lot of compliments. I think my style from a young age has always been quite different.
Yeah.
I think, looking back at childhood pictures, even like I always see myself standing out a little bit in the picture. So I think my love for fashion and style has always come predominantly from my travels, I would say. When
Mm.
you travel to so many different countries, you just see different styles and you start to appreciate different kind of ways of dressing. But for me, the way I dress is the way it makes me feel, right? So if I'm not having a good day, for example, even I will still make a thing to dress, and it makes me feel so much better, right? So I think it's an important thing, right? The way you look is is the way you make you feel. It's not for someone else. For me, it's more for myself on how I feel.
I love that. So confidence in your dressing. I heard someone call it dopamine dressing the other day.
Yeah, yeah. I
Dop-
think a lot of people say it might be you do it for attention, but for me, like I said, ever since probably the age of 10, I've always just loved style, fashion, appreciated different styles as well. So yeah,
Love that. So, and you've always been the best dressed in the room. And we started coaching and working together many moons ago now, pre-COVID. And we
yeah,
were on sales really. So you were leading the sales team. You've been selling yourself,
yeah.
and it's been a minute since that those days. So what's changed most, do you think, in either how you sell now or how you lead a team of salespeople? Is there anything in particular that's changed in your strategy, or what's had the impact?
Yeah, I think ever since those COVID days, Nicola, when you came into London, so I think what we were really missing was that core feeling of sales, right? For me, I've always loved selling myself. And I feel like what the biggest challenge, I could say, or pain point we had at Londonist was dealing with so many different people within the business and them not knowing how to sell the product, right? So I think when you came in, I think you were talking about, you know, majorly getting on the phone, knowing your product, knowing who you're selling to. And I think those are some of the core foundations that we still instilled in the team today. I think moving forward now that the business has transformed obviously since you've started with us, loads of things have changed, right? So price points for students, how we talk to parents, there's more questions from students and parents. So I think the shift that we're doing in a leadership point of view is still consistently having that training for the team every single month because our product's always changing, right? I think secondly, I feel the new people joining in the team are sometimes are afraid of getting on the phone because they're sitting in a sales office, right? So they're like, am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to do something wrong? So I think for us, it's instilling a culture where you're encouraged to get on the phone, but we're there to support you if you are going to make something. Not, I wouldn't say something wrong, but I think a lot of people are afraid of like, what if I do this wrong? If I do that wrong? And I think a lot of the team that we're bringing in now, they're from, I don't want to call it Gen Z, but they're from a new generation, right? Where they like WhatsApping, they like texting. But I think for our business still, the accommodations that we're selling are kind of higher end accommodation. So the parents want to speak to you, the students have more questions. It's a big investment for them to book an accommodation. So I think for them, it's important to still speak to these students and parents in detail, because it's not selling like a handbag or a trainer, right? It's a product that they're going to be, it's essentially their home for a year, right? So it's quite important for me that the sales team really delivered that message to the students of exactly what they're getting.
Interesting. So are you getting different questions now post-COVID from the parents and the students?
I think a lot of the questions are around recently is more about like finances, really. Like what is this really the best accommodation I can get for my money? I think financially, not just in the UK, I think there's a big challenge globally. And I think we have used different methods like AI, which has really transformed the business, right? Where I know everyone talks about AI and selling and stuff, but our AI product is actually really quite transformative in the business. But regardless of AI, there are still so many people that just want to get on the phone with someone and be like, just tell me more about the area. Like, is it really safe? What's London like? Like, what's my future going to be like if I stay in this place? So I think the questions, I wouldn't say are much more different. I think COVID was completely different, right? Where they were just talking like, I mean, we were in a world where no one knew what was going on. But I think now things are settled down. But I think students are really wondering, like, is UK really the best destination for me? So despite them inquiring in London, I think early on students are still like, well, do you think Australia's better for me, or do you think London's better for me, or do you think Canada's better for me? So we're not educational counselors, right? However, what we can advise on is London's got the top universities in the world for sure. It's a great place to build your career for sure. It's got a great culture and a great history, as the UK has. So I think the team's also been trained on those kind of aspects, right? Because students don't just have questions on accommodation. So for example, if the student's going to stay in Shoreditch, okay, what's Shoreditch like in terms of culture? What's it in terms of nightlife? Because if you're a student, let's say you're sitting in, I don't know, Brazil, for example, you've never been to the UK, you can Google as much as you want, but it's completely different talking to someone that's been in London for many years, right?
Absolutely. So that's interesting. So you're not just selling student accommodation now, you're selling around it. So the feeling and the whole experience is used
Yeah,
almost as a tool to help them decide whether they
yeah.
want your student
I
accommodation.
think a lot of people don't consider the wider aspect, because we've had a lot of students come to London and they've stayed in a location. Let's take, for example, White City, and they were like, well, actually, I didn't know the area was going to be like this. I was looking for something more like this. So I think for us, when we do the training, it's quite important to sell the whole aspect around the accommodation as well of, okay, how far is it from your school? How far is it from your uni? How are you going to feel? What kind of students are living in that building? I think that's quite important now for students. It's not just like, okay, King's Cross is a great location, it's close to my uni. It's more than just that now.
I love that. Okay. And obviously they have to live somewhere. So, and assuming they're coming to London, they can find somewhere great with you. But it's a competitive market. So what do you do to keep an edge on your competitors? Not necessarily the packages. So is it this selling around it, selling the experience? Is it that you pick up the phone, or what is it that gives you the edge? Because you're obviously the superstar in this.
I think there's a multiple things that we do. I think, for example, number one is kind of our systems and how we use. For example, our student portal is probably the most seamless portal that can be used, so students can easily book within a couple of clicks. Within that, they can do a wide range of services, right? So book their airport transfers, book their tickets, book their train tickets, even get things ready before they get to London. So what we transform now, we find that a lot of students globally are arriving at 10 p.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Okay, like if you come to 3 a.m. in London, it's not like many countries, right? Tesco's closed, all the supermarkets are closed. Okay, where are you going to get your toilet paper? Where are you going to get your toothbrush? Where are you going to get your milk? Where are you going to get your bread? You're hungry. You've just arrived in London, right? That's not a really nice experience for a lot of students, right? You're lost. Maybe you couldn't find the accommodation. So I think that's the first thing that we do. If you're coming to London, a lot of students will send us their flight details. Okay, you're coming at this time. Within the portal, you can click items that you want ready in your room before you get there. I think that's on the kind of overall service level. I think the second thing is having a wide range of kind of language speakers within our company. I think that's quite important. I think a lot of students can speak English. I think everyone does speak a little bit of English, but I think it gives that student that comfort of before they get to London, I can speak to someone that is familiar to me, a language that's familiar to me. I think that's really quite a point that a lot of companies may miss. We've got 28 different languages that we speak within the team here. So I think that's really important. And I think the last thing is really the communication, really, because I think we are around the clock. We've got a round the clock team, as you mentioned at the start. We've got an office in Istanbul, we've got an office in Shanghai, and then we've got a team that works in the evening. So I think, especially in the high season, a lot of companies you may see you cannot reach someone. It's like you're talking to a live chat system, and it's like auto messages, and you can't reach anyone. And for us, you can pick up the phone, and I think that's really quite important. And I think the last thing is having that short-term flexibility in our accommodation, and not just in our accommodation, but the payment plans. Because as I just touched on before, not all students have that financial power to really pay in 2 installments, 3 installments, as a lot of the other competitors may do. So we're very flexible in terms of payments as well for students, and really just understanding that the market's shifting now. It's not how it was pre-COVID or just post-COVID. A lot of things in the world have shifted.
I have. It's an unsteady foundation, isn't it? So, just to summarize, if we were to give key points for the person listening, so we've got ease. What I was hearing is you've made it easy for them
Yeah,
to work with you. Flexibility, both in payments and accommodations and the offer.
yeah,
Communication, so they can get hold of someone that they feel comfortable communicating with at any point.
yeah.
Difficult for other teams, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that we've really kind of worked on in the last couple of years is kind of more like exclusivity in a lot of buildings. So moving into September, we've got the whole building in Paddington, which is 357 beds. So we've got a lot more exclusive properties just to Londoners that you won't be able to find online.
Nice.
And also like room types. What I found in the last kind of 10 years being in the industry, a lot of students want very specific room types or levels. They want a room facing the river, or they want a room on certain floors. So I think what we've worked hard on in the last couple of years is kind of securing those kind of high level rooms where they're exclusive to Londonists, right? So you can only book those via us, which has really helped the business as well.
Okay. And so, in terms of working with the parents, so a lot of the people listening to this will be working in education offering rather than student accommodation offering. It's
Yeah,
all the same thing. What could you tell them about, so this new generation of parents, if you like, what is important to them? Is it the same ease of communication, flexibility, etc., or do they have different needs, or is
I
it?
think the biggest thing, regardless of where they are in the world, whether it's Europe, Latin America, Asia, I think the biggest thing when we speak to parents is safety. I think that's predominantly due to maybe kind of social media or news, which may highlight certain things happening in the UK, right? I think there's been a high rise of obviously kind of phone thefts, crimes like this, and certain videos will get posted. So I think the first thing parents talk us about is safety.
Mhm.
And I think the second thing for the parents is, to be honest, very surrounded around financial. Like is this, because it's a huge investment, right? I mean, some accommodations for a year are around £28,000, £30,000.
Mhm.
Some of the more budget options are still around £12,000 to £15,000, right? So for anyone, that's a huge financial kind of investment for their son or daughter. So they really want to know, like, okay, is this really the best product that I'm getting? And I think the last part for the parents is that, okay, how enriching is this experience going to be? It's quite a strange question we get as an accommodation provider, right? Because you would think that's a question maybe for their counsellor or their school, but I think they want that security around every touch point of where they're going. So I think the number one is obviously their school or university. Second is their accommodation provider, and then the last one is obviously, is my son or daughter happy? So I think those are the three things the parents really look at. Is like, okay, do I get the comfort from that university? Do I get the comfort of where they're staying? And is my son or daughter essentially really going to be happy there?
I love that. It all comes down to the child being happy. You're only as happy as your most unhappy child, the saying goes.
Yes.
Um, Good. So moving on to when we first worked together, you were just starting to manage a relatively small team. I think you did have the China office, but not, and
Yeah.
well, I had a much smaller team, but you were still selling as well. So you were juggling everything, and lots of the people listening will mainly tell me they have no time to do anything. And I know you said the same to me back then as well. So,
Yeah.
and we looked at ways to obviously streamline and juggle, but still get the results and get
Yeah.
everybody else up to scratch. So, how do you remember how you used to juggle everything and still make your number and still manage the team? What were the tips back then?
I think back then, if you asked me that question back then a couple of years ago, I probably wouldn't have the answer for you. I think it's challenging, right? I think for a lot of business people, I mean, even for yourself, you're very successful in what you're doing, juggling No Fluff and many other businesses. And I think for me, what I've learned is really around planning is the main point, I would say. I think I take so much time in planning, kind of not just my week, but the days as well. So previously, what I would do, I was juggling a lot of things, but I would attend to anything that would pop up, right? So an email will pop up and I'll be like, hey, I need to reply to that. And then a WhatsApp will pop up and I need to reply to that. Someone will ask me a question, Umang, can you help me with this? Okay, let me help you with this. But now, what I think I've really done is I've really honed in on planning. Like, for example, on Sunday, I would plan for a very solid 1 hour my week ahead. Okay, Monday, I'm going to do this. And I'm very strict around my timing. I think previously I would give away my time quite freely, and then that would lead me to not being fixed on my agenda. But now, the teams had to learn, really, to be honest with you. Like, it's not that I'm not there, and I think that's something I've learned from you, Nicola. I think you gave me that tip where you kind of have a session or a section in the day for 40 minutes. You tell all the team, okay, all the questions you ask me before, and then you answer all of them within that section in the day. So I've kind of put that into my agenda now as well, because I think there's a science behind it, isn't there? Where you kind of, if you focus,
Mm-hmm.
you lose your focus for a minute. It takes you another. I think you told me this. I don't know the kind of science or maths behind it, but you lose your focus, and it's so hard to regain on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm doing now in the business is a lot more critical in terms of numbers and working on the finance. So if I do lose my focus, it's very difficult for me to hone back. So yeah, to answer your question, I think the biggest point for me is planning and kind of making people aware of time as well, without you're not just available at any second, right? Of course, if it's urgent, you have to attend to it, but little things I think can wait. And this, luckily at Londonist, we've got other certain members that have grown in the business that can take on those questions. So I think the second point I want to make is having people, enriching them to kind of lead as well, and giving them that. I never like using the word power. I would like to say giving them that responsibility to lead and make decisions as well is quite important.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was 40 minutes. I'm trying to think back to the stat. So if you're disrupted, your thought or your focus is disrupted, it takes 40 minutes to get back your full focus back on it. But it also takes you, I can't remember how long, but over 100% longer to complete the tasks.
Yeah,
It was wild. I remember learning that.
yeah,
But yeah, so sectioning off your time and being quite intentional about the day is good.
yeah.
So I'm assuming you plan your day, but you probably have time for things that come up.
Of course, yeah. I'm always an early starter as well, Nicola, to be honest with you, because obviously our timings are 9 to 6 in the high season, 9 to 5. But for me, I like to start early. I like to get in around 7:30 every day, where you get your coffee, you set up for the day. You're not rushing. You're planning.
Mhm.
You're kind of sifting through the kind of easy emails you can just put aside, and then really start the day strong. I think that's always a key success for a lot of successful people. I think I do listen to a lot of podcasts and see how successful people operate, and I think that's always comes up. Starting early and getting the day started well.
Yes, I am as well. Poor people that aren't early birds though, but yes, I'm an early starter too. Um, Good. So thank you very much for all of that. So what's your one red hot sales tip? So to convert an inquiry into a sale, into a booking or into an enrollment, what would that one red hot tip be for our listeners?
I think the red hot tip, it may sound kind of crazy, but I think sometimes internally it's a kind of a sense of urgency. And I think sometimes people think we do it, internally people think we do it just to kind of close sales, but genuinely in the business that we're running, it's kind of accommodation, right? So I think what our team do now, in certain properties, obviously, is like, well, it's like the last room left, or there's only 2 rooms left, and that's genuinely true. Even on our website, you can see like 2 beds remaining, 3 beds remaining. I think that really helps. I mean, if you put yourself in the perspective of a person buying something, right, and it's like, I don't know, you see a car and it's something that you really like, and it's like that's the only car. There's no more production of it. You're kind of incensed to buy it, right? But I think it's a balance of giving an urgency but not pushing as well. I think that line is pretty much impossible to train. It's such a fine line of, you know, feeling very pushy but actually giving that sense of urgency. I think that's just a skill learned over time by doing it. You know, I don't think you can train it, but you can't really teach it. I mean, me personally, I don't like going into a shop and feel pushed to buy something. You know, actually, I walk out. I don't like being pushed, but I like attention. So, like when I'm in a shop, if I don't get any attention, I'm just like, you know, they're just walking around. I'm like, what they're doing. So, I think what I try and tell the team is actually giving the student the attention they need. So, being responsive, listening to them, but not being overly pushy as well is quite important, because no one likes that, right? Especially the products that we're dealing with. You're not, as I said, you're not selling a handbag or some shoes. You're dealing with a product that's an investment for a student, right? So you need to listen, but you still need to create that, because a lot of students will look around. You know, they will look around. They'll look for the best deal, and then if you're not able to convert, you know, they potentially may go somewhere else, especially in the market that we're dealing with. So to kind of answer your question in a nutshell, I think it's a fine balance between a very good service, very good attention, but also having that underlying maybe sense of, I don't want to call it urgency, but, you know, look, the market's hot. You know, it's like when I look on booking.com, and if I'm looking at a hotel, of course, you know, you're looking at the king room with a sea view, there's 2 beds left, you know, that inside me is like, okay, let me book now, you know. So I think that's the kind of point I'm trying to make here.
So add urgency when there is urgency, just so they don't miss out.
Yeah.
So it's the right thing for them. I think you're right, but I think you always have stood out for your customer service, and I think one thing that you've done very well, even from the beginning when we were talking about ideal client avatars and things years and years ago, you've always put that customer first. What makes it easy for them to book? What makes it
Yeah.
essential for them to talk to us in their own language, and what do they need on that student portal? Like, I want my eggs and my milk in my room ready
Yeah.
when I arrive at 3 in the morning. It's, you always put that customer first, and I love that about what you do. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I think it's a post service with the students as well, because it's not just when they stay in accommodation. So, okay, you book their accommodation, but what we try and tell the sales agents is when they check in, there's always some questions they may have, right? Like, this is not working, or I'm not happy with this. And I think a normal kind of sales team might just be like, okay, let me move on to the next deal, or let me move on to the next booking. But what we've told the team why that's important is also about retention, because around 35% of our bookings are rebookers. So if you actually treat the customer well, obviously that's imperative for me anyway, but they're likely to come back the next year and rebook with you specifically. So when I was selling, I had such a huge pool of students that would always, even to this day, still come back to me. I've had a student for 8 years who stayed in London, and they would always come back to me, Umang, I just want to book with you, no matter what the price, whatever it is. I just want to book with you because of the service.
Love that. That's, the retention is key, isn't it?
Yeah,
Your best advert is your happy customers.
definitely.
Brilliant. Well, and how do people find you? So, where people want to get in touch with you and tell you how fantastic you've been on this podcast, or they want to learn more about Londonist, where do they go? Where do you?
So they can find Londonist obviously on LinkedIn. They can find myself on LinkedIn. We've got all of the social media pages. So Instagram, we have our TikToks, we have our website, we have kind of our global website, we have our WeChat. So we're pretty much anywhere you find Londonist, is you would find us. So it will be quite difficult not to find us, I would say, Nicola.
Omnipresent. I love that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being part of Selling Education. As always, it's been brilliant to chat with you, and lovely to hear about your growth and your tips that you've shared with our listeners. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Nicola. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you.